Okay, hi guys, it's Mrs. Millicent. Let's do the check your understanding on page 112. Okay, before we do this, let's do a quick little review of the 68, 95, 99.7 rule. Okay, this is for normal distributions. And all this means again, so here's my little normal distribution. Here's my mean, okay? I have 1, 2, and 3 standard deviations above the mean, 1, 2, and 3 standard deviations below the mean. So the 68, 95, 99.7 rule says within 1% or within 1 standard deviation above and below the mean, 68% of my data should lie on a normal distribution. Okay? Within 2 standard deviations of the mean, 95% of my data should lie between 2 standard deviations above and below the mean on a normal distribution. And then third number of the rule, 3 standard deviations below and above the mean should house 99.7% of my data. So anything greater than 3 standard deviations above the mean or less than 3 standard deviations below the mean are very rare. I mean, together these are 0.3%, so each one is 0.15%. Very, very rare chance of happening, okay? Not even near 1%, okay? So that's our recap. So number 1 says, sketch the normal density curve for distribution of young women's heights, okay? We were told that women's heights are approximately normal with a mean of 64.5 inches and a standard deviation of 2.5 inches, okay? So if we sketch our normal curve, we're just going to label all of our standard deviations. Okay, let me make it a little bigger so I can get my numbers in here. Okay, so my mean is now 64.5 inches. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and 3 standard deviations above. There's a sigma. So 64 plus 2.5, what is that? 64, 65, 67 inches, right? And then add 2.5 more, so that's 69.5, and then add 2.5 more, and that's 72 inches, okay? So if somebody is 72 inches, they're 3 standard deviations above the mean. And then to go 1, 2, and 3 standard deviations below the mean, I'm just going to subtract 2.5 every single time. So 64.5 minus 2.5 is 62. 62 minus 2.5 is 59.5, and then 59.5 minus 2.5 is 57, okay? So a majority of women age 18 to 24 are between 3 standard deviations above and below the mean. Means they're between 57 and 72 inches tall, okay? So that is my sketch of a normal distribution for the women's heights, okay? So number 2 says, what percent of women have heights greater than 67 inches? So greater than 67. I'm just going to sketch something real quick. So here's my 64.5, and here's my 67. Whoops, 1 standard deviation. So greater than 67. Well, if we go back to our empirical rule, okay, the mean is smack dab in the middle, okay? So this part right here, from here over, is 50%, right? It's in the middle, that's 50%, that's 50%, okay? Now this little section right here, if this whole thing, 1 standard deviation below and above the mean is 68, we just divide it up. So this little portion is going to be 34, okay? So this is 34%. So all this from here to the left is 50 plus 34, which is 84%. Well, if this is 84%, this has to be its complement. So this will be 100% minus 84%, which is 16%. So we can safely say that 16% of women ages 18 to 24 are greater than 67 inches tall. Okay, so that's how we use our empirical rule for that. Okay. Now the next one says, and showing your work. Here's all my work, okay? Number 3 says, what percent of women have heights between 62 and 72? Okay, so we're going to need that information. Let me draw another little curve so we can mark it up. So here's my mean. 62 is 1 standard deviation below the mean, and 72 is 3 standard deviations above the mean. Did I say below and above? 1 and 2. Okay, so I want this area. Okay, well, we already know that because that's 1 standard deviation above and below the mean. So that is 68%. So I got to figure out that little segment and that little segment. Okay, well, if I take the difference, let me label these. If I take the difference between 95 and 68, if I take this difference between 95 and 68, I'll have these two little sections. And then if I cut it in half, I'll have that one section. So 95 minus 68 is 27. Divide that in half, and that is 13 and a half. So this little segment right here is 13 and a half. Okay, that's between 1 and 2 standard deviations. Now to find that little segment, I'm going to do the same thing with my 3 standard deviations. So I have 99.7%. So if I, again, find the difference between 99.7 and 95, I'll have these little sections. Then I can just divide them in half, and I'll have that little section. Okay, so 99.7 minus 95 is 4.7. Divide that by 2, 2.35. So this little part right here is 2.35. So if I add all these up, that's 68, that's 13 and a half, and that's 2.5. So 68 plus 13 and a half plus 2.35 equals 83.85. So I can safely say that 83.85 of women age 18 to 24 are between 62 and 72 inches tall. Okay? Okay, great. Thanks. See you later.